All right, thanks again for coming. This is me, as we've heard. Darren mentioned some of the books that I've worked on. Here are some of them up here. The one with my name is the biggest. But I went to Ivey, that's how we roll. But you'll see there's a theme that's involved in these, is technology is involved. So we've done work with technology, how it interacts with business, but also society, so the role that it plays. So Wiki Brands, which you're all going to have a copy of. Here is a summary of the book. So if you've used these, this is how Wordle works in the algorithm. The more often a word appears, the bigger it is. So you can see that we talk a lot about community and brand, social, how all of that impacts. Underlying these, though, is technology and the role that it plays. So here is a graphic that I like to look at. This is the same scene in 2 years in Vatican City. Pope Benedict's on the bottom, Pope Francis is on the top. If you look carefully, you can tell a difference in with the crowd. So what are all of these people doing? Now, there is some thoughts that if you're always taking pictures of everything, it doesn't actually go through your brain. And when I travel, I actually don't do that very often. Because, first of all, I think if I'm traveling with a group of people, most of the other people can use their camera better, and I'll just steal their photo off of Facebook. But also, if you're collecting this all the time, you're not actually living. So what I would like to do today in the presentation part is to talk about 10 trends in technology, which you mentioned how laughable my thesis was in 1997.
No, your daughter thinks it's laughable.
Well, yeah, so you take HTTP and then the colon and the backslash. No, the other backslash. And we were telling people you need to have a website and explain what that meant. But here's some 10 trends that have changed, and this has changed even since the book has come out, which is a couple of years ago. So the first is wearable computing. And I have one. Does anybody have one of these? You have a Fitbit? Or do you have a Jawbone? Yeah. So do you mind telling the group what it is, what it does? Yeah. So, and it does sleep quality. It keeps track of your steps. And just by being tracked, changes things. Darren, how many steps do you take in a class?
In a class, about 2,200 steps in an 80-minute class, case teaching.
Yeah. And one thing it does, of course, whenever you're measured, it changes your behavior. So I have a client in Cincinnati. I had 2 consecutive trips where the flight coming back to Toronto was at 7:30, but the client didn't want to, we finished early enough he could drop me off at the airport at 4. So twice I had that break of about 3 hours in the airport. The first time I had this, so I spent that time just doing loops of the Northern Kentucky airport, got another 3 miles, because Darren would know we're connected. He knows how many steps I take a day. The next time I was there, I had forgotten this. So I wasn't going to get any credit for doing this exercise. So I watched a few episodes of Homeland on my iPad, and I felt completely fair about it. So because you're measured, it changes things. I absolutely walk more because of this. I absolutely walk more because, as Darren would know, if I don't. You're back walking, I see. You're
I had to repair my band, and my band broke on my Fitbit, so I stopped walking. And gained about 5 pounds in 3 weeks until I got it fixed.
According to the data, he was on his couch playing PlayStation. Yeah. What I saw. But you do notice that there is some competitiveness for it. People do keep track and remind you. I think, and I've heard very good things about the Jawbone. Speaking of laughable, this is enormous for what it does. If it was any smaller, we would lose it. But considering it's huge, and I think this will be replaced as it goes. Maybe just something that goes on your fingernail, maybe a dot of a tattoo, maybe something on your Google Glass that would actually change. But we're collecting all of this information, and it could be very good for health. You can type in, if you're keeping track of your blood glucose, you can keep track. It doesn't measure that, but you can keep track via your dashboard, also blood pressure and things like that. So there are some implications for privacy we'll talk about a little bit later. But maybe you can get a better life insurance if you can show that you're actually walking and not hiring some neighborhood kid to go do your walking for you. But wearable computing is absolutely huge. It was at the Consumer Electronics Show this year. It was the biggest category. And we'll see more of it. Like everything in computing, it will get more sophisticated, cheaper, and smaller and faster. So that's the first one. Second one is brand advocacy. So think of 1990, if you were a fan of an organization, what would you do? Probably nothing. If you were going to complain to an organization, maybe you would write a letter to the president. 6 weeks later, somebody in PR would have a response for you, apologizing maybe. Now we can change and impact companies in a really granular, important way. So the logo up there on your top left, that company is what? And what medium did that artist use? Yeah, it's a crop circle. So somebody, a group of students who decided they were fans of Firefox. There's a lot of work to do that. It's 144 square feet. You can see it from on Google Earth. They decided to do that. Would anybody do that for like Internet Explorer? I don't think so. So it's got sort of the underground. They decided really to make it grow. Maker's Mark Bourbon Company, very strong ambassador program. They have more than 100,000 people who are ambassadors. When they go to parties, they say, here's what we should drink. They do it for free. They're happy to do it. Their name would be on a cask at Maker's Mark headquarters. And they get involved in the company in a very important way. Harley Davidson, what's the Harley Davidson brand? Who could summarize that? What does it stand for? There's participation marks, right, Darren?
We'll see.
Any motorcycle riders in the group? You get it. So if you would you think it's sort of a rebel type job, sort of stick it to the man, open road, even though people are accountants by day. One of their key metrics is how many new tattoos they get on their consumers each year. So they measure their brand impact on a dermatological level. How many people in the room have a liquid Tide tattoo? Probably not many, but it really resonates with them. That tattoo pretty much looks fake, but Apple is very important. Any Apple users in the room? So you're a little bit cooler than everybody else around you. It actually means something. It is important to Apple, even though that tattoo does look fake. Speaking of fake, so is this article, but it is funny. This was in The Onion. So it says, Apple claims new iPhone only visible to the most loyal of consumers. So as it goes on, it's talking more and more about how only people that really get the essence of Apple can use this phone. So next is crowdsourcing. The term crowdsourcing is just using unique minds that could be everywhere, usually outside the company, to help a company or organization thrive. A couple examples in here. Has anybody used Mindstorms? So, well, you guys have. So, Andrew, what's Mindstorms? You just took a bite. Sorry. Yeah, do you know some of the cooler things it can do? Well, it actually, so this is pure Lego, what we talked about, or what we played with as kids, but there is a robot that can solve a Rubik's Cube. You can make a photocopier out of Lego Mindstorms where the only non-Lego piece is a pencil. It actually works. They have an online forum where the people who are fans of this upload their programs, upload their designs, and they're ranked amongst the community members. Lego wanted to do the next version of this, so they went to that group and they asked the top 10 people, would you like to come and help us develop the group? So they did. They went over to Denmark on their own dime to help develop this program. We interviewed a couple of them for the book, and we had this question that we asked over and over in our research that always got a dumbfounded response of how could you guys even get a book deal? You're really dumb. They said, why wouldn't we do this? We have the opportunity to help build the coolest product there is. They didn't even get free version of the product they designed, but they had the opportunity to buy it at full retail before anybody else did. So this is the Hubble telescope. Hubble telescope takes hundreds of millions of pictures of space. There was a scientist in Britain who was studying galaxies, and he had a team of 14 grad students and tens of millions of pictures to look at. So what he was hoping is if he published all of these photos on the internet, people would be able to help him. So all he wanted to know is the galaxies elliptical or are they spiral? So we live in a spiral galaxy. We're near the end, in the Milky Way. So he says, if it's spiral, tell me which way it's turning. He has a 15-minute tutorial on his website on galactic morphology that everybody in this room would be enough of an expert after taking that tutorial to be able to help him. And it's one of those tasks that humans are still much better than computers at for some reason. So he was hoping, he has a team of 14, said maybe there's another 14 people that would like to join. Got picked up by BBC, 80,000 people signed up. And those 80,000 people, in the first 3 months, looked at 10 million galaxies. Not only did they do what he asked, they also made some great scientific discoveries, including that there's more than 2 types of galaxies. There's some that are a ring shape. There's some spiral that have 3 arms. And we talked to a couple of these people, same question, why did you do this? Pause. I better be polite to this Canadian who's phoned me. They said, well, what else would I have done tonight? I could have watched American Idol. Or I could have gone to the pub. Instead, I'm looking at a piece of space that no other human being had ever looked at. Really, really important. Procter & Gamble, I worked there early in my career, used to be very strong about not invented here. Very strong group of scientists that were there. They weren't interested in looking outside the organization. They've completely switched on that. They now have a proudly found elsewhere point of view. Does anybody use the Tide pen? Familiar with the Tide pen? Michelle, what does it do? Yeah, so you're sipping coffee, ready for a presentation. I don't think it happened to me. So they were looking for a molecule that did that. They put it onto an exchange, looking for scientists. Somebody came up with that, and they bought it from that person and continued on. So it becomes, of course, much more powerful when you have all of the minds in the world working on a problem or a set of problems. So crowdsourcing is number 3. Collaboration is involved, is related to it. So in collaboration, you are getting your fan base to be involved in a real way. Remember this contest? This is a Frito-Lay contest. That is Karen Weber Needham, stay-at-home mom, innovator in snack foods. So Frito-Lay said we were having a contest. We want somebody to develop a new flavor. She won with cheesy garlic bread. Sounds pretty good. I shudder to think what series of chemicals they would have to put in place to make that happen, but that doesn't matter. So she won either $1 million or 1% of the sales, whatever is bigger. And became a very, very cool human interest story as well. They're running the same contest again this year if you have an idea that's as good as a cheesy garlic bread. Anybody play games like this in this room? These guys again. Andrew, what's a walkthrough? Yeah, you heard that term? Yeah. Yes. Exactly right. So in a games like this, it's not purely linear, but you can get stuck. So if you're on a mission you can't solve, you would go and you look for a walkthrough, which traditionally was a Word document. And it made for this game, the first version came out 48 hours after the game did. It was 100,000 words, so it's a 300-page book. Now it's more videos. Walkthroughs are now, here's actually, instead of telling you how to solve a mission, it actually does it. So the author of that walkthrough, did he work for Rockstar Games or PlayStation? He's just a dude. He's somebody that just adds to the community. The guy who was in this game, we talked to him, and why did you do this? You're not getting paid for it. Again, the awkward silence, and said, why wouldn't I do this? I'm a huge member of the Grand Theft Auto community. And these games, if you're good at these games, it takes you about 60 hours of gameplay to make it through. What you saying? Yeah. This game took me, I did this for research purposes. Took me 4 years to finish. The 20-somethings that worked for me at the time were appalled by that. I've had vacation times blocked off to finish certain missions. What else could I have done in those 4 years? My PhD maybe, learned a language, looked at 30,000 galaxies. But no, I made it in through this game. So a lot is added to the value by, in this case, Chase Ansock was the guy's name. TripAdvisor users? Anybody in the room? TripAdvisor is fantastic. My wife and I, when we go to Europe, we don't like staying in the Sheraton. We like staying in a neighborhood, something that's very, very authentic. I love their reviews. They're getting better at weeding out the fake reviews. I'm more sophisticated than some, so I can tell in other cases, but The quality of the language recognition, sentiment analysis is a way computers can tell if something is positive or negative. Not perfect yet, but getting better. And also I find, and maybe some of the people that use it, that having some 1-star or the lowest reviews aren't bad. If you want a romantic weekend and somebody gives it a 1-star review, there's no children's activities. Good. I don't want children's activities. I want the pool to be very cold and very, very deep. Because we don't want kids running around. There's in the book we talk about a winner of the dirtiest hotel, and it's so the reviews on this are very, very funny, and the people are there very zen, almost proud of the fact of how disgusting the hotel is, and their response is, "Yeah, but it's cheap." You know, fair enough. Donald Mitchell was at one point the highest ranked Amazon reviewer. Very, very powerful person. He gets dozens of books sent to him every week, unsolicited, because if he writes a review, it'll get a big bump. Anybody take the subway commuters here? You notice there's a book ad right now, and it's for, I don't remember what it's called. It's a Canadian author, and it's a story about a kid growing up in the Holocaust. I noticed that on the blurb, it isn't from the Globe and Mail, it's from top Amazon reviewer. Very, very powerful people. And they, what's important to them is where they're ranked in the system. They get an electronic badge. What existentially is an electronic badge? Just some pixels. Very, very important to some people. A lot of VP marketings miss this. So if you're a vice president of marketing, you yourself are probably motivated by title and salary, bonus, prestige. You are probably not as interested about it, having some pixels being a slightly different color. And some companies missed out on this, but having things like that where people are recognized in a non-monetary way for making your community much, much better is very important, very powerful. So entertainment, I think that we are in, certainly for television, the best era we've ever seen. So what were the best TV shows of the 1970s or 1980s? What was the best? Liam, what do you say? Starsky and Hutch. So would Starsky and Hutch stand up today? It would get, in fact, they did a parody of it getting mocked. I would think if you watched MASH, which was considered cutting edge, it would really look formulaic and terrible based on how good television is today. I was a big fan of Hill Street Blues. I used to rush home from my job at Swiss Chalet to watch it. I would get home 36 minutes into it. We had a VHS, so I would rewind to come to the front. It's just not as authentic because it's difficult to be on network TV. So Frank would meet with the gang leaders, and they would say, "Frankie, this is friggin' ridiculous." I say, "Gang leaders don't say friggin'." So, Jeff, give me 5 reasons why House of Cards is innovative. 5. 7? Okay.
There's probably 5 reasons containing for this. I think it takes what HBO did and does it so much better in terms of swapping the stakeholders. For the television stuff that we use, the primary stakeholder is always the advertiser. We had to write shows in such a way that the structure people commercial investments in this brand. And HBO went and said, well, no, we're going to actually consider the customers. We're going to maximize revenue. So that made it better. And then Netflix came along and said, well, we've only kind of captured that because if you really want to do a show, you need to be able to enjoy the merits. And so, we're going to make all of it available all at once. That really puts the consumer in control, have it begin this narrative that's designed to maximize the show. So I think that's important. It's really fantastic.
Very good. And who watches this? Who's seen House of Cards? So what I would add to that, and you touched on, well, first of all, the fact you can binge watch it, they just said, we're going to make it all available at once. And they actually super encourage you to do it, because what happens when an episode ends? Not even. If you don't specifically say, I've had enough, it's going to start. And you can say, because there's cliffhangers, well, I'll just watch the first 15 minutes, then go do something else. You watch the whole thing, the third one starts. So binge watching is a very important thing. There is a very brilliant article in Salon talking about marital infidelity as it relates to TV watching. So your spouse goes out of town, you watch 3 episodes, and don't tell them about it. Then when they come back, you have to watch it again and appear surprised. Yeah. Peggy Olson, that is not how you were raised. Also, so this actor is Kevin Spacey. In the 80s, an actor of that caliber, multiple Oscar winner, didn't appear on TV. Generally, within most actors, it's Broadway first, then serious movies, then not serious movies, then TV, then dinner theater, stage west, where you get people sort of at the end. Kevin Spacey appears in this. Why? The storytelling is much better. 13 episodes, is it? 12. So in a season, you have 12 hours to develop characters. A movie simply can't compete with that. A movie can't be longer than 3 hours. Out 2.5 hours, people's bladders are bursting. Storytelling is much, much better. On this, you get better people coming in. Also, there was no pilot involved in this. Normally, how TV works is you have 500 ideas. Of those, they make 30 to write a script for. Of those 30, 12 are made into a pilot. Of those 12 pilots, 2 go on the air. Of those 2, a quarter is renewed for the second season. What Netflix did with House of Cards says, go make a season. So there wasn't a stage where the network executives came in and says, love your World War I historical drama. If you can just make everybody elves and have them ride unicorns, that would be great. Go back and rewrite it. That didn't happen with these guys. They were able just to do it K4. So it's much better TV, and the audience doesn't need to be as big. For the last 5 years, most of the Emmy winners have not been on network TV. They've had smaller audiences, but really good audiences, smart people, and the metrics are set up differently. What's this in your top left? What did that guy do? Yeah, he jumped from space. So, yeah, that's right, and it was sponsored by Red Bull. Really, really powerful way of advertising because there was no commercials, but everybody knew that it was Red Bull and how it's set up. 10 million people watched it live on the internet, which set a record. That's the most people that have watched an event happen live. It's a podcast. Any podcast listeners? What are your favorite podcasts, Ian? Okay. So for a podcast for people that have it, it's just an electronic audio file, so you can listen to it as you exercise or commute. There's millions of these. Of the millions, more than 99% are terrible, but 1% times a million is a lot of really good material, which you couldn't possibly make it through. I download every episode of 10 different podcasts. 5 of those make sure I listen to every single one. Probably my favorite is this one, Hardcore History. Has anybody heard about this? I'm looking around the room. A lot of people probably took high school in Ontario. So unless you were very, very lucky, your history wasn't very good. We learned about Louis Riel in 1867. It was even worse for me because when I was in public school, they seemed to change the curriculum every year. So every year we did the West Coast Natives. Year after year. I'm 11 years old saying, Miss Aljabor, we did this. They used the whole whale. We know. Move on. Can we talk about some other Native people? So what Dan Carlin does is he has 4-hour history lectures, and they are fantastic. And they're available on the podcast. Once you listen to them, I expect you'll want to go back and listen to his whole library. They're so, so, so good. And he has 1 million people that download each episode. His business model is at the end, his engineer comes on and says, hey, did you like it? If you liked it, give us $1 a show. So if you run the math, let's say that 1% of his audience does send $1 a show. That's, it's $10,000 that comes through a week in to run their podcast. He actually does have 2. But if there's 1 million people download that, it's very, very powerful. It's 1 million people that choose to listen to his voice. What would happen to a network TV show if 1 million people watched it? People would get fired. Only 1 million people. If you actually look at the list of the highest rated TV shows in history, and we remove Super Bowls, we remove the last episode of Seinfeld, and we remove the last episode of MASH, what else is remaining in that? It's an obscure question I don't expect you to know, but 5 of them are just regular episode of Beverly Hillbillies. Not a very special episode of Beverly Hillbillies, just right. Because why? You would have all of North America with 3 choices, whatever the top was. There's audience with shows with huge audiences that got canceled because they weren't good enough. But with these niches, you could find people who are interested in listening to a 4-hour lecture about Genghis Khan and loving it and thriving it isn't everybody, but those 1 million people are a very important group. And we do story sync. So it's a second screen experience. What do you think that means? Second screen experience. So, sorry, what's your name? Amy. That's right. And on what screen? Anything. Yeah. So while you're watching Breaking Bad, on this screen you can discuss what's going on. You can predict with other people what's happening. Sometimes the Mad Men is very good at this. They'd have some sort of obscure reference to the 1960s. Sometimes they just make it up to mess with people. So people would immediately go on and try, who is that person they just mentioned? So it's really rich extra experience because most people, especially younger people, aren't watching TV just watching TV. They're doing something in front of it. I saw a very good Korean movie once while I was doing my email. I had to stop realizing, no, this doesn't work. I don't actually speak Korean. I have to look at the main screen to read the subtitles. I thought I did, but I didn't. So entertainment has changed in really, really interesting ways. And we're lucky, I think, to receive this. Related to that is collaborative filtering. Have you heard the term collaborative filtering? You can kind of figure out what it means. It's basically if you liked Rome on HBO, maybe you want to see these movies. It's also about the Roman Empire. Maybe you're interested in an online course about the Roman Empire. Maybe you're interested in going to a Roman Empire theme weekend. So it collects information not just about you, but about people like you. And these ads you see about the bottom of a website, often click here to find other things on the web. The two leading companies here are Outbrain and Taboola. Both of them are run by people that used to be officers in the Israeli intelligence corps. And they were that good at having, really figuring out what is the best thing to look at. Based on, it knows that you're a 45-year-old professional, it knows that you're married, it knows you have a kid at college, it knows you're on your way home from work, and what to suggest better. You mentioned Netflix. Is Netflix good at recommending things to you? That's true, as long as you don't share your account. Or if you decide to buy a Bieber movie for your niece, you have to tell it, no, I was kidding. That wasn't me. Or I was very drunk when it filled in. So it can figure out, and they spent a lot of money on their algorithm deciding if a person has viewed movie X, what should it suggest next. They had after they had that, very, very successful, they had another $1 million contest to improve the algorithm. The winner of that figured out that the same consumer is in the mood for a different type of movie on Tuesday than for Saturday. So Tuesday night, maybe they want a very innovative, thoughtful documentary. On Friday night, they want these things blow up. Or they want a dopey romantic comedy. But it can figure it out. And it's even better in the States because they have a wider library to choose from. But it is good at picking things out. Amazon, of course, is good at that. You have bought X. You should also think of buying Y. Next is the sharing economy. Anybody used Uber? Other than you? And so what is Uber?
Uber's a taxi sort of calling service that I guess a cab driver subscribes to, and it's an app that you put on your phone. You don't even have to pull out your credit card.
That's right. You rate them and they rate you. Is it a cab? Is it always a cab?
It doesn't have to be.
It could be a car. Yeah.
Or an SUV if you really wanted it to be that way.
Yeah, and taxi drivers that paid $300,000 for the medallion don't like this because anybody can do it. I read about one guy in Silicon Valley who only picks up passengers from 3 buildings. Any idea why he would do that? Why he would pick just 3 buildings to pick up? Amy? Close. He only picks up from those buildings that are full of venture capitalists because he has a pitch for his app. There's nothing to do with that. He's not interested in making money from it, but if there's a call there, he's right around the corner, and he'll pitch his app to that executive in the back seat. It's the only reason that he wants to do it. We could do a whole seminar on this, on surge pricing. They adjust to meet supply and demand. So if it's snowy and you're in Manhattan, it'll cost 3 times as much. It might cost $500 to do a 12-block ride. It's written, so there's criticism of that. The Uber CEO handle it diplomatically, but handle it properly and logically, saying what surge pricing does is it puts more people on the road. It sucks to drive in the snow in Manhattan. But for $500 for a 12-block ride, which might take an hour and a half, could be worth it. So really changing things. Taxi drivers, of course, taxi companies don't like this. It upsets their business model. Hotel owners certainly don't like Airbnb. Anybody used Airbnb? Fantastic. What was your experience with it? Yeah? So you probably got a full flat for cheaper than a hotel room, multiple, probably you would have laundry, bring less luggage. Yeah. So, and when you hear about the bad things about this, it's usually this press sort of being jerks, because you hear the bad stories about somebody setting up a brothel in your apartment while you went to visit your mother, but bad things happen in hotels too. It's really wonderful. Does the hotel industry like this? Of course not. There's lawsuits in New York right now because there's a law in New York that you're not allowed to rent an apartment for less than a month, and it was set up to prevent predatory pricing by landlords. It wasn't set up to protect Marriott. But Marriott is now reminding people this is in place. We need to figure things out. TaskRabbit is cool. It's not available in Toronto, but there's equivalents for it. How that works is you set up some sort of errand. The people on the internet bid to run it. I had a former colleague of mine is a Texan, and I had a bet with him about whether Canada or the U.S. would win more medals in the last Olympics. Turns out he won. This former superpower won a lot of bronze medals. We won the two most important golds in men's and women's hockey, men's and women's curling. I was happy with it, but I lost the bet. So he was going to send me Texas barbecue. I needed to send him poutine. So I had to figure out how do you send poutine from Toronto to Houston without it being unsafe when it gets there, or just like a homogeneous bag of mush. I figured out there was a place in Houston that actually makes authentic poutine, so I put it up on TaskRabbit. Some guy said, okay, I'll go pick this up. Very earnest guy says, can I charge you for the toll? Yeah, absolutely. I want to get there as fast as I can. Delivered it to his office. Put the picture up on Facebook saying this is waiting for you in the lobby. He said, thanks, I'm at Disney World. But his colleagues enjoyed the poutine that I sent him. FreeCycle, it's set up for environmental purposes, but when you're done with something, whether it's a book or a movie or a lawnmower, put it on FreeCycle, somebody else can find it. Who doesn't like that? People who sell new lawnmowers. People who sell books and movies and stuff. So all of this has changed, and I would put it all into the category of sharing economy. Progressive snapshot. What it does is it measures your driving behavior. Do you speed? Do you stop and start? Do you drive at night? Do you drive when it's raining? Do you drive in bad neighborhoods? If you don't do any of those things, do you deserve to have better insurance rates? Would you? You're sharing your information with them. So because of those things, do I deserve? Maybe. There's an argument to be made for that. Progressive has that. Says if you're willing to give up this data, we can now verify that your car didn't speed, didn't go into bad neighborhoods, didn't drive at night. Sure, the actuarial tables show that it's better for us to give you a better deal. It'll still be profitable for us, and you get a break. Downsides to that? Jeff, anything scary about that? That's right. So they can say, well, I noticed that after an armed robbery, your car drove right by. You could have picked up this robber as he was leaving the bet. Prove that you didn't. Or you could say, your boss thought you were in Seattle. This shows that you were in Mississauga. Lots of other things that can happen with that. Also, from a societal point of view, who lives in dangerous neighborhoods? What sort of people? Mostly people that can't afford to live in good neighborhoods. So is it fair from a societal point of view to have basically a poverty tax? It is. It's discriminatory. So it's very, very complicated. And the concept of giving up privacy for better service has certainly changed. That's changed since '97. Is people are much more willing to give that up, and it's a slippery slope. You give up a little bit of privacy each day to get maybe better service. And it's tricky to manage. You need to be sophisticated and constantly vigilant to make sure that you're keeping track of this. And in many cases, you can't. Once people know about you, you're not going to change things. So very important point. This is a pretty good book. I like Gene better than Tom, but they're both nice people. Computing on Analytics talks about how to use data to help every part of the organization. Most of the examples I talked about today already are a bit in marketing, but really you can use analytics anywhere. Some good ways of using analytics in HR is figuring out who's going to quit. So some ways of doing this is you can just monitor email in a macro sense. Did the word unfair show up in email more than it did last quarter? What about the word sucks? You can figure out and how to figure if it's a good employee that's about to leave. How often are they on LinkedIn? By the way, if you want to raise, update your LinkedIn profile. If your boss is on LinkedIn, they'll notice that, and it may be an opportunity to have a discussion for that. The University of Kentucky did this. They had a series of data that predicted when people are going to drop out of school. So, of course, if you know when somebody's going to drop out of school 3 weeks before they drop out of school, you can send a Dawn or an RA or a Dean or phone their parents or get that involved. The data was because of all the student cards that have a chip in it. They may notice didn't go to class, didn't leave the dorm, usually had breakfast at 7, now doesn't have breakfast at all. It goes into the cafeteria for the first time at 1, doesn't go to watch basketball games, doesn't go to the gym. All really good information to figure that out. Privacy point of view? Yeah, but it can be very worthwhile. I did a study on using sensors for supply chain. So sensors used to just tell where something is. So it proves, originally set up, I deliver you a package, this proves that it left my custody and went to your custody. It's a lot more sophisticated than that now. It can measure temperature, it can measure light. So one of the implications of measuring light is, has the container been open? You can see how much has been jostled around, which may indicate what roads you should take. So if the most efficient route, actually we talked to an engine manufacturer that was in Eastern Europe that shipped to Western Europe. The best roads by speed weren't necessarily the best roads because things got broken along the way, depending on how fragile the engines could be. Finance, if you can tell, our top customer has now gone from 60 days deliverable or 60 days payable to 93 days payable. Maybe we don't triage them to have as much good service for it. If a truck is on its way somewhere and we knew it took a very fast turn, maybe the produce in there got crushed. So let's work on getting that priced differently, putting something on special. And if we put those avocados on special, that means we have to change another previous special. So companies that are using all these analytics well have massive advantage over companies that don't. Which leads us to the last one, information exhaust. So you could probably speculate what that means if you haven't heard it before, but it's like exhaust coming out of a car. If exhaust coming out of a car was harnessed properly, it could heat something, or that energy could be used for something else just wasted. Information exhaust is information that is generated by someone and is useless to that person, but not necessarily useless overall. McKinsey estimates that in medical practices, 90% of the information is actually exhaust. So if you go into a doctor's office and you complain about an ailment, that doctor will probably write you a prescription for something, send you on your way. You're satisfied, they're satisfied, it's happened. The fact that you were a 61-year-old woman that came in and said that at this season based on your body size and your diet, all of that is useful information that isn't collected somewhere. So there's big opportunity for somebody to collect that in a macro sense and work on it. Google, by the way, knows about flu season before anybody else, because it can say in Atlanta how many people Googled Kleenex or flu symptoms or flu medication. So it knows very quickly. So lots of information all pounded in at once. So